What happens when the math behind a powerful political family's luxury lifestyle simply refuses to add up?
Well, it usually means someone with a federal badge is going to start pulling the bank records to see exactly where that extra money is coming from.
Right. Welcome to the deep dive. I'm so glad you're joining us today because we have an incredibly complex, high stakes puzzle to piece together.
We really do.
Our mission today is unpacking a massive stack of recent investigative notes and political commentary. We're looking at federal probes into California Governor Gavin Newsom and his wife, Jennifer Siebel Newsom.
Yeah, and before we get into the weeds here, we really need to be crystal clear with you about the nature of our sources today.
Oh, absolutely essential. The stack of material we are looking at comes heavily from highly charged political commentary.
Right, specifically from right-wing media outlets and independent broadcasters.
Exactly. So we want to state right up front, this deep dive is not endorsing these viewpoints. We are not taking any political sides here.
Definitely not.
Our job is simply to impartially unpack the financial arguments and the legal claims they're making, so you can understand the controversy.
Right, we want you to understand the actual mechanics. We're looking at the data points, the money trails, the legal threats, strictly as an impartial exercise.
So let's just get grounded. Could you give us the rapid-fire 90-second overview of exactly what these documents are claiming? Give us the hard numbers.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's get the timeline and the players straight. We are looking at three massive federal agencies here: the Department of Justice, the IRS, and the FBI.
Okay, all three.
Yep. They are all investigating the Newsom family, and this was sparked by a series of whistleblower complaints. Now, investigators always follow the money, right?
Always.
And the initial trigger here is a massive financial discrepancy. So Governor Newsom reports bringing in about $1.2 to $1.4 million in income every year.
Okay, 1.2 to 1.4 million.
Right. But the compiled data alleges his family spends way more than that. They allegedly drop over $1.6 million just on general living expenses and massive mortgage payments.
Wow. Which means they are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars more than they are supposedly making.
Exactly. And the money trail doesn't stop with the governor. The investigation is heavily focused on his wife, Jennifer Siebel Newsom.
Right.
She runs a nonprofit organization that collected $1.48 million in licensing fees directly from public schools. And meanwhile, she paid herself a massive $3.7 million salary from that same nonprofit.
Wait, 3.7 million?
Yeah. And to top it all off, the legal threat just became incredibly real. The governor's former chief of staff recently pleaded guilty to fraud.
Oh, wow.
She admitted to lying to the FBI and is now actively cooperating with federal investigators.
Okay, I mean, that is a ton to process. So let's take a step back and start where the IRS always starts, the personal ledger.
Yeah, that's step one.
The argument being made here revolves around what is known as a lifestyle audit, right?
Yes, exactly.
Oh.
When the IRS does a lifestyle audit, they aren't just looking at the tax forms you file. They look at the actual life you are actively living.
Okay, so like the cars, the houses.
Right. They use a technique, often called the net worth method. So they look at your houses, your cars, your general expenditures. And if your bank accounts and assets are growing by $2 million a year, but you only report earning $1 million, well, the IRS is going to ask where that extra million came from.
Makes sense. And that leads directly to the numbers you just mentioned. The allegation is that his reported income is roughly $1.2 to $1.4 million.
Correct.
But then the expense column shows over $1 million in living expenses and $625,000 in mortgage payments alone.
Yeah, the math just, it doesn't work.
It's like trying to pour 2 gallons of water into a 1-gallon jug, you know? Eventually, someone notices the spill.
That's a perfect way to put it. It creates what accountants call a structural deficit. And when you are a public official, an unexplained structural deficit is an immediate red flag.
But wait, let me push back a little here. A lot of wealthy people have complex finances.
Sure they do.
They have investments, they have family trusts, things like that. So is spending more than your salary actually a crime, or is it just really bad optics?
Well, spending more than your salary isn't a crime if you are dipping into known legally acquired savings.
Okay.
The problem, according to the investigative notes, is how they handle massive property purchases. The documents highlight a $3.7 million estate purchased in Sacramento.
A $3.7 million estate. Okay.
And the governor didn't just write a personal check for it. The transaction was conducted through an undisclosed limited liability company. an LLC.
Okay, but again, millions of people use LLCs. I mean, I know people with LLCs for their small businesses. That isn't illegal.
No, not at all.
So what specifically turns a standard privacy measure into an IRS target? Like, at what point does privacy start looking like evasion to an investigator?
That is the crucial distinction to make. You are entirely right. An LLC is just a legal container.
Right.
If you are a famous politician, you might legitimately buy a house through an LLC named something generic like Pacific Holdings, just so crazy people don't show up at your front door.
Makes total sense. That's just safety, privacy.
Exactly. But here is the mechanism that triggers the IRS. An LLC is what is known as a pass-through entity.
Pass through.
Yeah. It doesn't pay taxes itself. The tax burden passes through to the owner's personal tax returns via a document called a Schedule K-1.
Oh, I see.
So even if the public cannot see the LLC on the public property deed, the IRS absolutely must see it on your private tax return.
Okay, got it.
And the central allegation in these documents is that this specific LLC does not appear on his tax returns at all.
Oh, well, that changes things.
Completely. If the LLC is missing from the tax return, that moves the needle from understandable privacy to potential concealment.
Right.
The IRS investigator looks at the income gap, then looks at a hidden multi-million-dollar property, and suddenly they have the legal probable cause they need to subpoena private bank records.
And this brings up a major frustration that's heavily highlighted in the commentary, the issue of transparency.
Oh, yeah. This is a huge point of contention.
The notes point out that Newsom has refused to publicly release his tax returns for the general public to scrutinize.
Right. Instead, he uses a very specific controlled strategy. He allows a few select journalists to view his tax returns during closed-door sessions.
Closed door, meaning they can't take them out.
Exactly. They can look at the documents,
Right.
but they cannot take copies or publish the raw data.
Which the commentators sharply contrast with how Donald Trump's tax returns were handled.
Right. The sources make a massive deal out of this comparison.
They point out that someone within the IRS actually leaked Trump's tax returns to the public, which, by the way, was a federal crime that resulted in prison time for the leaker.
Right.
So the argument being constructed in the right-wing sources here is that there is a two-tiered system of justice. They feel Newsom gets to hide behind closed doors while political opponents have their private records illegally exposed.
Yeah, it speaks to a deep suspicion of the establishment. I mean, when you have a massive unexplained gap between income and expenses, and the raw financial data is deliberately kept out of public view, it naturally fuels the idea that something is being hidden.
Right, absolutely. So if the IRS hits a wall trying to trace real estate LLCs, their next logical step is to look at the household's secondary income streams.
Exactly. You look for the other cash flows.
And that points investigators and the sources we were unpacking directly to Jennifer Siebel Newsom's nonprofit, the Representation Project.
Right. If the primary salary doesn't cover the lifestyle, you follow the money.
And this is where the mechanics get incredibly fascinating, because we are moving from private real estate into public taxpayer dollars.
We are.
Before we talk about the money, let's define what this nonprofit actually does. They create educational materials and films focused on what is broadly termed social emotional learning, or SEL.
Right. And for those unfamiliar, social emotional learning is an educational framework designed to teach students how to manage their emotions, develop empathy, handle interpersonal relationships.
Okay.
It's become very common in schools,
Sure.
but also, as the sources point out, highly debated.
Right. And the critical mechanism here is that the California State Board of Education actually approved these specific SEL materials for use in state public schools.
That state approval is the engine of the entire financial model.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Once the state board stamps its approval on the curriculum, public schools are basically incentivized, or sometimes outright required, to begin purchasing the rights to use it.
And the documents detail that taxpayer dollars paid $1.48 million in licensing fees just to screen these films in public schools.
Yep, $1.48 million.
Let's use an analogy to understand the argument the sources are making here. It's like the state building a massive new highway, legally requiring all the local school buses to drive on it, but then allowing the governor's spouse to own the only toll booth on that road.
That is exactly the ultimate loop the sources are describing. The state mandates or approves the curriculum, the taxpayers fund the local schools, the schools pay the nonprofit to use the material, and then the nonprofit pays the governor's spouse a massive salary.
And the numbers on that salary are staggering. The note states she has paid herself $3.7 million since 2012.
Yeah, and the data analysis in the commentary points out that this level of compensation places her in the top 5% of all charity executives nationwide.
Top 5%. That's wild.
It is.
Plus, the allegations go further, claiming that $1.64 million was funneled from the nonprofit directly into her own separate for-profit production company.
Yeah, the sources call that out as a major red flag.
So let me ask the obvious question. How is this legal? Does the law actually prevent spouses from doing business with the state like this, or is this just a massive ethical gray area?
Well, you are hitting on the difference between strict legality and a conflict of interest. Mechanically speaking, it is generally legal for a charity board to set its own executive compensation, as long as they can justify it based on the revenue brought in.
Right, sure.
And legally, a spouse is absolutely allowed to have an independent career that interacts with the public sector.
But you're saying there's a catch.
A massive one. The ethical loop becomes highly problematic when you introduce the corporate donations outlined in the documents.
Corporate donations.
Yeah. The notes reveal that this nonprofit accepted over $800,000 from entities that actively lobby the governor's office.
Wait, actively lobby the governor?
Yes. We are talking about massive state utility and healthcare players like PG&E, AT&T, and Kaiser Permanente.
Wait, let me make sure I understand the mechanism here. A giant utility company like PG&E, which constantly needs favorable regulations and rate approvals from the governor,
Exactly.
is simultaneously writing massive checks to a nonprofit. And that nonprofit then pays the governor's wife a top-tier salary.
Precisely. That is the anatomy of a conflict of interest.
Wow.
Even if the charity operates totally within the letter of the law, the flow of money from state lobbyists into an organization that directly supports the governor's household income, well, it creates a huge problem.
Because it looks like a workaround.
Right. It allows corporate money to indirectly influence the executive branch under the guise of philanthropy.
And the commentary doesn't just attack the financial loop either. They are heavily critical of the actual product being sold to the schools.
Oh, very critical.
The argument is that the first partner leveraged her husband's political power to push specific gender ideologies into classrooms under the banner of SEL.
Yeah, the materials are described as teaching children highly specific views on traditional gender norms and sexuality. The sources cite terms like pansexuality being taught to middle schoolers.
Middle schoolers.
Yeah, and utilizing a gingerbread person diagram to explain gender identity.
The documents claim this has sparked massive parental backlash, too. They mention uncensored clips and explicit discussions. And they cite specific complaints from Stanislaus County where 11 and 12-year-old students were allegedly traumatized by the explicit content.
And what the commentators do here is really interesting. They juxtapose this focus on social curriculum against hard educational statistics to make a broader point about state priorities.
Right. The data they pull on California's education metrics is pretty grim.
It's very grim.
They note that 44% of 11th graders are currently failing to meet basic reading standards, and nearly 70% are below par in math.
Yep.
So the argument they are building is that the state is throwing millions of taxpayer dollars at controversial social ideologies, profiting the governor's family while actively failing to teach kids how to read and do math.
If you synthesize all of this, the commentary is building a dual narrative. They are arguing there is financial corruption in how the money is routed,
Right.
and a moral corruption in what that money is actually purchasing for the state's children.
Which naturally transitions us from the realm of bad optics and parental outrage directly into severe legal jeopardy.
Yeah, this is where it gets really serious.
Because the FBI isn't just auditing spreadsheets and curriculum guides anymore. They have a cooperating witness from the inside.
And not just any witness. This is the most critical development in the entire investigation.
The sources highlight the involvement of Dana Williamson, who is Gavin Newsom's former chief of staff. She didn't just get served with a subpoena. She recently pleaded guilty to federal fraud charges and admitted to lying to the FBI.
Yeah, that's huge.
And she faces up to 38 years in prison. 38 years. And to reduce that sentence, she is now providing testimony to federal investigators about the Newsom administration.
To understand why this matters, you have to understand the role of a chief of staff.
Yeah.
They aren't just a high-level employee.
Right, they run everything.
Exactly. They're the ultimate gatekeepers. They manage the schedule, they interface with the mega donors, they sit in the room when the quiet parts are said out loud.
Wow.
A cooperating chief of staff is the skeleton key for a federal prosecutor.
Now, you might be listening to this and thinking, politicians get investigated all the time, they claim it's a witch hunt, and nothing ever comes of it.
Happens every day.
Right. So how does this situation with a witness like Williamson actually move from a political headache into real prison time?
Well, it comes down to establishing intent and a pattern of behavior. For example, the documents point to a history of financial reporting failures.
Okay, what kind of failures?
They note a recent $31,500 fine levied against Newsom for the late reporting of $5.6 million in charitable donations.
$5.6 million.
Right, money that was supposedly raised for Los Angeles wildfires. Furthermore, he was previously fined for failing to disclose $14 million in donations between 2019 and 2024.
See, to a normal person, a $30,000 fine on millions of dollars might just look like an administrative slap on the wrist, a paperwork error.
To the public, sure, it looks like a speeding ticket.
Yeah.
But to a federal prosecutor building a case, those fines establish a documented legal pattern of concealing financial data.
Now, to be fair to the full landscape of the story, Governor Newsom has publicly pushed back hard against all of this.
He has.
He claims the Department of Justice is abusing the grand jury process. And for those unfamiliar, a grand jury is a secret legal proceeding where prosecutors present evidence to citizens to secure an official criminal indictment.
Right. It is the step right before formal criminal charges are filed.
Newsom's defense points out that the DOJ is currently under acting head Todd Blanche, who has deep, well-documented ties to Donald Trump.
Right.
So Newsom's camp claims this entire investigation is a politically motivated attack meant to derail his potential 2028 presidential run. He argues they are just digging through random paperwork trying to invent a crime.
Attacking the motive of the investigator is the standard playbook in any high-profile political probe. But here's how prosecutors cut through the noise. A politician can go on television and claim the probe is a partisan witch hunt. But bank records, well, they do not have political affiliations.
You're just math.
Exactly. They're just math. When prosecutors build a criminal case, they rely on building blocks that are immune to political spin.
Like what?